Alright, so today we are going to be talking about classes, what they do, how they function, and how to utilize them. But first thing first, let's go ahead and erase everything other than the comments and basic functions that we've been using thus far inside of the series, because a lot of things that we're doing up to this point were very convoluted. It was a very bad way of doing things, and we're going to be cleaning up a lot of it with classes. You're going to see us do this destructive workflow quite a few times here in the beginning. We're having to completely erase everything and then redo everything from the ground up continuously, because the lessons that we're learning can be applied through the entirety of what we're doing. And to be honest, what I'm giving you guys is more like tools, and then you're adding them to your toolbox. And unless you use those tools, you'll never get the hang of them. So it's very good for us at the beginning here to erase all of that code and then redo it continuously. You see here that we actually already have created our first class. We have it right here. It's called first script. Now, if you go into Unity, you guys might think that this thing right here is the class. This thing right here that's attached to our game object, this component right here inside of Unity Talk, is the class, but it isn't the class. It is an instance of that class. So we're going to really need to talk about what the differences between those things are. So first off, let's go ahead and actually mess with this a little bit more. And let's create a couple things here. Let's go ahead and make a string name. That's what it's going to actually be called, string name. We're not going to send it equivalent to anything, actually. We're going to make it serialized field like we did before, so that you can actually manipulate it inside of the inspector. And we're going to do the same thing for string gender, right? Now, if we did this right, we can go inside of here, and inside of first script, you'll see that these things pop up, name and gender, right? So going inside of our start here, we can go ahead and say debug.log, my name is, and then we'll say name, and I am, and we'll say gender, right? If we write Jim here and we say Mel, right, and we hit play, you guys probably already know what's about to happen. We're gonna go over here, my name is Jim and I am Mel, right? Now, what happens if we add another first script onto here and we write Pam and we say female? Then we hit play, we go into the console, and we have my name is Pam and I am female, my name is Jim and I am male. You see over here that both of these ran separately. They ran first, actually the Pam ran, and then the Jim ran over here. Each ran separately as their own entities. They're each their own individual thing. They're each their own individual instance of the class. They both followed through and did what was inside of our script here. They did what was inside of our class here, but they did it separately from one another. They were each an individual instance. You see, a class is just a blueprint. It's a container for variables and functions. Now, we haven't really talked about functions yet, and we're not gonna in this video, so don't worry about it too much. But this is what a class is. It's just a container for variables and functions. But it's a blueprint for those things. It's only a blueprint, in each instance of that, it can build an infinite number of these instances. For instance, if we were talking about a blueprint for a car, this could be like the Toyota Corolla blueprint, and each one of these instances would be a separate Toyota Corolla, and they can have their own features. They can have their own different size rims, different radio settings, different aftermarket parts, and altogether different spoilers. You get the point. We used our first script and we decided to use it like as if it was a person blueprint, right? And we had a name and a gender inside of our thing for variables, right? Name. And then when we were able to create separate instances of that thing. So the instances are the actual product, the end product, while the blueprint is the class itself. I think you get the point. So that begs the question, what kind of blueprint do we need inside of our game right now? And the problem here is that we had our player, right? And we had an enemy, right? And they were both had separate variables for every little thing. They had a separate variable for their name. They had a separate variable for their attack. They had separate variables for their HP. They had all these separate variables individually for everything that was inside the game. Now, the problem with that is that doesn't scale very well. We'd have to have all those variables remade each time we made a new enemy. It's very easy for us to mess up things. We can have one int here as the player HP, right? And we can have that set as 10 or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And then we can have an enemy HP, and then that could be set to 100 or whatever. And then what if we name something else in the future, like int rat enemy, and we named it health points instead, right? Not even thinking about it. And so as you see here, there's no real way to force us into a naming convention of any kind. And as code gets to be 10,000 lines long, you're not going to remember what names you gave to things. There's nothing that's forcing you into it. The IntelliSense doesn't work that well with it. But once you create a class, IntelliSense works very well with it. IntelliSense is that auto completion that Visual Studio has built into it. And we want it to really be popping up for things. And we also want there to be a more fail-proof way to make sure our future self doesn't completely screw things up. A lot of code structure is just making sure our future self doesn't screw up. So we really want classes to kind of do that, to structure things a little bit better so that we can scale it up better and make more enemies as the future comes in. And once we start talking about functions, well, then we'll have even more power behind our classes at that point. So let's start actually making a class here. Let's erase all of this and this again. Sorry guys for the destructive workflow. We'll go down here below, down outside of these brackets that we've been working in this entire time. And we'll go down here to where we can make a class. Now, let's go ahead and see if you can make a class called Battler. Go ahead and try to do that now. You might be able to do it just based off of what's on the screen right now. Okay, so if you look over here and use this as kind of your blueprint, you can actually go ahead and make public class Battler, like this. And then you just simply put in the curly braces. Now some of you might have actually put in mono behavior after that with this colon and everything. You don't want that inside of there. So if you did this, go ahead and erase that part that's after Battler on here. We don't want this to be a mono behavior. And I haven't explained what this is yet, and we're not going to in this video. It's beyond the scope of this video. We will be explaining it in this series eventually, though. Remember, these things are just containers for variables and functions, just like we've been doing over here. So we can build our variables just like we built our variables up here. We can build it at the top of Battler. And actually, for another challenge to you guys, go ahead and make HP, max HP, and an attack stat for this character, for just battlers in general. Go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to go ahead and call this variables, just to write a comment on there so that everybody knows what's going on. And we'll say int max HP. We'll just say that, set that equivalent to 100. And then we'll make an int HP. We'll set that equivalent to, let's say, 100, just so that we're at our max HP. Then we'll do an int attack. And we'll set that equivalent to, let's 25. And those are kind of just initial stats for our whatever battler we make, right? What's interesting about this is that now we can write Battler over here, right? Just like over here. And now we can make an instance of Battler up here. We can make a player Battler. And then we write equals new Battler, parentheses, just like that. And we make a new Battler. Now this part right here is completely foreign to you at this point, and that's okay. But the part here on the left is very similar to what we've done before. You simply name the type of variable that you're creating, and then you make a player. In other words, this is just a variable, just like any other variable that we make. This is the player variable of the type Battler, right? Over here on the right-hand side is completely different because the type of object that we're making over here is an instance of a class. We have to make a new instance of that. Now, the reason why we have to do things like this is because if we make Battler enemy, right? And then we go over down here and we say enemy equals player, you can do this. You can set it equivalent to a non-new battler. You can set it equivalent to a battler that has already been in existence already. You don't have to make a new one every single time that you make a battler. Down here, we're just setting it equivalent to the battler that was already created. So both of these are actually the same battler at this point, which is giving our player an identity crisis. So let's go ahead and actually make him a new battler as well. And that creates us a separate new instance. Now to explain that one more time, so there's the player battler and the enemy battler, and the first time before I made each one a new battler, I set the player equivalent to an instance. I made him an instance of it. We made a new instance, right? And that was our player battler. Now when I set the enemy equivalent to the player, we set it equivalent to the same instance. They were literally the same thing at that point. If I would have changed the enemy HP, it would have changed the player's HP as well. Now, in this case, though, we want each one of these to be a new one. We want them to each have their own. So when we say new battler, we make an instance of that battler. And then when we set a new battler for the enemy, we have a new one for that. So each one has their own HP. He has his own HP, his own attack, and so forth, and we can manipulate those stats. So let's go back down here and start talking about this a little bit more, and let's change some things. Like right now the enemy stats aren't that great, and we don't want him to have as much HP and stuff as he has. So let's go ahead and make enemy.max HP to access that HP of his. That's his variable. So we go into that, and this dot lets you access different variables that those things have. So we're accessing enemy through right here. So Mr. Translator goes through, he looks at enemy, he goes, oh, that's a battler. And then we do this dot, that opens up that class for us. That dot accesses everything inside these brackets for us. And then we write in max HP, and then Mr. Translator goes, okay, I can go in there and mess with that. Let me go ahead and mess with that max HP. And now we want this enemy to be a pansy compared to us, so we want him to be able to get one-shotted, basically. So let's make him have 25 max HP. If you go over here, you see max HP is inaccessible due to his protection level. Now, we haven't talked about scope at all. We haven't talked about protection levels. So really, Mr. Translator does a lot more work than we actually talk about. Mr. Translator reads int max HP equals 100, right? What he actually reads is private int max HP equals 100. And what private means is that it's only accessible within these brackets. So by nature, for instance, these are actually private. That means this variable player is only accessible inside of these brackets, the same brackets that they were created inside. And you can inception this thing. Like for instance, enemy right here is private as well, and it can go inside the brackets within the brackets. So you can inception it, but you can't go outside of the brackets that you were created in if you are private. Your privates are private. We need to have access to these variables down here outside of these brackets. Then we need to go public with it. And then you'll see the red squiggly lines go away. Everything outside of this has access. So we can go ahead and erase the private if we're not planning on changing it, right? We don't care if Mr. Translator just assumes that it's private, then it can just be private. So anyways, let's make all these public so that we have access to them and can use them. And then let's go ahead and set our current HP to the enemy dot max HP, and he can go ahead and keep on hitting at 25 because we have a lot more HP than he does. He won't one-shot us. And then from here, let's go ahead and see if you guys can go ahead and make yourselves a way to make an attack happen and hit the enemy once as the player. You don't need to make him die or anything. We're going to erase all this code again inside the next video anyway. So you don't need to make them die or anything. You just need to make it so that the player can attack the enemy in some way. Go ahead and do that now. Alright, so let's make a new variable up here, a boolean, and let's just call it attack. Now, you guys might have done this as a string like we did inside the last video, but I'm going to do it as a boolean just to give us access, and we're going to serialize this field so that we can actually manipulate it inside of the inspector. So we're going to go down here below this, and we're going to write an if statement on here, and we're going to say if attack. And then let's go ahead and make it so that the enemy.hp equals enemy HP minus the player.attack, right? And then let's go ahead and debug.log that out. Enemy was attacked, has enemy.hp left, right? So going back over here into Unity, Jim and Pam should be going away here. Now, if we go ahead and hit the play button here, we go into our console, and if we click one of these attacks right here, whoa, that went crazy on us. And the reason why it went crazy on us is because we never, ever, ever set the Boolean back to false. So let's go ahead and make that back to false right there. Let's go back into Unity, console. We click on here and boom, we hit the enemy once. Now the problem here is that we have two instances of this whole first script, so there's another enemy on there, and we can go ahead and change his HP and hit this one's HP as well. They're both separate, so we'll go ahead and actually just erase one of these. If you click the three dots on the right hand side of the one that you want to get rid of, you can click on remove component through a left click as well, and it'll get rid of one of those scripts for you. Now you'll see this test version on mine, and it's not going to be on yours. Don't worry about that. That's just something I do to prepare for these videos ahead of time. So that's about it for this video right here. I just wanted to give you guys a quick dipping of your toes into classes. If you're not understanding it right now, that's completely okay. This is one of the bigger core concepts of scripting in general. It might take you a couple exposures, and we're going to re-explain it and show it more, especially inside the next video, where we're going to actually talk about functions a lot and go into what they do, why they exist, exists. And so I think that you guys are going to really enjoy the next video, and because it's going to clear up a lot of the questions that you might have about what a class is. Other than that, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. There is a link to the Patreon down in the description below if you would like to support this channel further. Otherwise, thank you so much. Really, thank you for spending this time with me. I'm really, really grateful. I hope that you guys all have a great day. Bye.